Ahoy, adventurers! Your old buddy Hambone is here with a brand new coupon code from our friends over at Noble Knight Games. That's right, Noble Knight is back with another code, this time for $5 off. Orders $25 or more, and that code is MONSTERS. Now, what's cool about this code is now is the best time to be hanging out safe and sound at home playing games with your friends and family. So this is a great way to get a nice little discount on the game that you've been thinking about picking up and having shipped directly to your house. If you're local to Noble Knight is doing touch-free curbside pickup Monday through Saturday, noon to 5 p.m. All you got to do is call ahead and order your items online. You can check out more info on that on their website, nobleknight.com. And make sure when you check out, you use the code MONSTERS. That's MONSTERS. MONSTERS for $5 off. Your order's $25 or more, now through June 21st.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and today we have a very special guest. Chris Leader is here to talk to Stu and I about the brand new Back to the Future Dice Through Time game coming out from Ravensburger Games. So without further ado, let's go back in time just 1 week to when Stu and I sat down for a chat with Chris Leader. Here we go. All right, so with us tonight is the lead designer of the Back to the Future Dice Through Time game, Chris Leader. Chris, how's it going tonight?
It is fantastic. I'm actually having a wonderful day today.
How wonderful.
That's good.
Yeah, and you know what? Being on the show here, it just caps off a wonderful day. So that's fantastic all around.
We're like an ice cream sundae.
Yeah, you're like the cherry right on top of a happy day, bringing happiness and joy and sugar and loveliness.
Well, you know what makes me happy, guys? I love Back to the Future. Like, I love Back to the Future. And when I was at PAX Unplugged back in December, I was talking to some of our friends over at Ravensburger Games, and they mentioned that the Back to the Future game was coming, and I have been chomping at the bit to get my hands on it and to see what is going on under the hood of the DeLorean in this game. So, Chris, you designed this with Ken Franklin and Kevin Rogers.
That's correct. Yes. I'm right there with you. I've been looking forward to a fantastic tabletop experience, and we decided that we were going to make one all on our own, and now people get to play it, which is fantastic.
So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about the experience behind making this game, because this is, for all intents and purposes, one of the greatest American film trilogies ever. And this is, in fact, the 35th anniversary of Back to the Future, and here's this game.
So I will say, for me personally, this is not one of the greatest film trilogies. This is the greatest film trilogy. I throw the gauntlet down. I mean, there are some caveats to that. Indiana Jones is not a trilogy anymore. Now there's like 53 Star Wars movies. So really, you look at Godfather and Back to the Future. There's not that many film trilogies. But for me, I'd even put these things up against all of those classics when they were trilogies, because I've lived and breathed Back to the Future since since 1986. And sadly, I can't say 1985 because I didn't see it in the theater. I was in 4th grade. I wasn't able to see it. I saw it on VHS, and I wore that tape out watching it. So ever since then, I've been a mega fan. I have a curio cabinet downstairs full of DeLoreans. I have a flux capacitor signed by Christopher Lloyd that actually works.
Wow.
I'm a little bit crazy, and people have known that about me my whole life, is that Back to the Future was like the thing that defined me. Oh, it's a Back to the Future guy, right? So this means everything to me. When we got the opportunity to do this, Kevin, my co-designer, and I had already kind of thought through what would we want in a Back to the Future game if we ever got a chance to make this thing. In our wildest dreams, what would it be? What do you need? You have to have Doc. You have to have Marty. You have to have the DeLorean, the hoverboard, the clock tower, all this stuff. And then we asked ourselves, who would you want to be in a Back to the Future game? Like if you had to pick your players, pick your characters. Player 1 chooses Doc. Player 2 chooses Marty. Who's player 3 going to choose? Einstein? So We decided early on, we had those discussions as fans, and we said, if we wanted to make the ultimate Back to the Future game, everyone wants to be Doc and Marty, right? You want to be in the DeLorean, you want to be Doc and Marty. And so we decided we want to make this a cooperative game, because Back to the Future is really a story of hope. I mean, there's a lot. It's about changing your life for the better. It's about doing cool things. It's an awesome adventure. It's not a downtrodden story. So we made this into a cooperative game, and we said, well, the conceit should be, what if everyone plays as Doc and Marty with their own DeLorean, but you're working together because space and time are unraveling and you need to put it back together. And so you're Doc and Marty from different points in the trilogy coming together to work together, but you got to be careful, because just like in the movies, you don't want to bump into your other selves, or you could affect the space-time continuum. So that's where we started from in this whole thing. And me and Kevin had that sort of idea when Ravensburger came to us and said, we have this license, we'd like to see if you'd be interested. I was vibrating at that point. I was so excited. I was like, I need to do this. So I called Kev. I said, we got to pull that idea out of mothballs. And I called Ken and I said, I need you to help, because we've worked together for years on other projects. We did the Mansky Caper for Calliope Games. He's really fun, and he helps to offset some of my craziness with his own type of craziness, and it just makes things better. So I said, I need you guys to work with me. We have to get this thing right. We have to make that ultimate Back to the Future experience on the table. And luckily, they completely understood where my insanity was coming from. And we worked together really well to put the thing together. We took that idea that Kevin and I had, we brought it to fruition. So here's a fun thing. So Ravensburger only asked for like a 2-page pitch. We had a full working game with a rule set and everything. And then we had to like kind of go back and be like, all right, we're going to give you these 2 pages of like a pitch, but hey, just so you know, we have a fully working and tested game if you would like. And I think we kind of blew them away with the fact that the passion for this thing was off the charts. I mean, this was more than, if we had gotten like a license that everybody loved and we could do it, that'd be great. I mean, even if it was like a Star Wars game, we would be excited, but there was something about Back to the Future that we tapped into and had the passion for, that for me especially, but for the other guys too, we knew we had to get this right and make a game that was fun for everybody and really brought in the theme of Back to the Future.
So what is it about Back to the Future that really grabbed you, that like turned into this lifelong obsession? What do you think that it all boils down to for you?
I would like to say it's about the manipulation of time and the cool, going back into the first movie and the second movie and all that. But I really think it's the stainless steel car, though. I really think something about my young self seeing that DeLorean drive down onto the parking lot of the mall in the first movie. I think my eyes just went wide and I was like, okay, I'm bought into this. This is cool. I had never, in my formative filmatic experience, I'd never seen a suspenseful ending like the end of the first Back to the Future movie. The 10:04 p.m., the lightning bolt striking the clock tower, all of that just infused me with a love for that. And then I was absolutely there day one when the second movie came out, and having them go back into the events of the first movie, go back to 1955, and Marty's climbing above himself. I was like, what is this? There's 2 Martys. This is amazing. Just really cool, to the point where when they ended the second movie and it was immediately a trailer for the third one and it was in the Old West, I never liked Westerns as a kid. And for a minute I was let down. I was like, really? It's an Old West movie? But then I saw that and I loved that one. And it's funny, you talk to people, they have different loves for the different movies. I like 3 because it has heart to it. The first one is like a perfect cinematic thing. The second one is all like sci-fi crazy time travel shenanigans. But the third one gets back to like kind of heart and soul, right? So for me, they each have their own merits. And taken together, I just think it's a wonderful story and it holds together really well. And my kids are young right now and I can show it to them and they still can enjoy it for all of the visual splendor and the stuff like that. They don't get the nuances. And sure enough, they don't get what's going on with Biff and Lorraine in the first movie or anything like that, but they get to enjoy, the movie for what it is.
I remember being a kid, and my buddy Ian, who I grew up with, we were always playing Ghostbusters. He got a VHS copy of I mean, we're literally running around the schoolyard pretending that we're Ghostbusters. He got a VHS copy of Back to the Future, and he had seen it before I did. And we sat down and we watched it together. And at the end, like, I just can remember him, like, looking at me and just waiting for the ending to happen. I'm like, why do you keep looking at me? You're being weird. And then it just ended. And it was to be continued. And at that point, I'd never seen a movie that was to be continued before. You didn't do that in movies. The movie ended. You're supposed to end the movie, and then maybe there's another movie, like Planet of the Apes had multiple Planet of the Apes at that point. But this was something that was so foreign to me. And then we immediately watched Back to the Future 2, and I remember being the same kid in the theater watching, going, wait, they already have a trailer for them. They just finished this movie. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that they were making these movies back to back and that 3 was coming and we weren't going to have to wait too long for it. I would even go so far as to argue that 3 is probably the best in the series. And I'm going to take a lot of heat for that, I know, but man, like, there is something really special about 3. It's a perfect Western movie.
It really is. And it's a perfect Western movie on its own. It's also a perfect homage to Western actors and plots and things from Hollywood. So it works as a Western, but it also kind of pays homage to all of these wonderful actors who were in Westerns back in their day. So all of the old guys sitting around the saloon are just character actors from old West movies. I have a lot of love for 3, and there's some people who either A, never got to 3, or B, are like, man, it's okay. But for me, I really think the trilogy as a whole holds up. And to me, that's pretty amazing. I don't think there was a drop in quality. I think they cared all the way through. If nothing else, it just gets stronger because they're able to tie in the plots even tighter, and it becomes more fun.
And Biff through the years is arguably one of the best parts of the movie. And I mean, that is an actor really stretching some chops by being 4 different versions of himself throughout time.
Thomas F. Wilson was pretty amazing, and him being the punky 1955 Biff and being the bully 1985 older Biff, and then also the Donald Trumpy 1985 alternate Biff, and then as Buford, Mad Dog Tannen, he's fantastic. Yeah, he's perfectly cast all the way around. I think the casting of the movie really made it, and that's what's amazing. Not to go off on crazy tangents, but knowing that originally Marty McFly was played by Eric Stoltz for the first 6 weeks of filming, and then they realized this is not working, and they fired Eric Stoltz and they brought in Michael J. Fox, and it would not have been what it is if Eric Stoltz had stuck around, because he was a dramatic actor. He couldn't pull off that sort of comedy mixed with fish out of water thing that they needed for Marty McFly.
So everyone gets to be Marty in this game. Biff is the main antagonist of the game.
Yes, you mentioned different versions of Biff, and every year that's in the movies is in this. You have 1885, 1955, 1985, and 2015. Every year has its own Tannen. It either has a Biff or it's got Buford, and they are in their areas, and they basically move around based on the cards you play, and they become blockers. So they get in your way, and you have to play fist dice results in order to punch Biff out of the way so that you can actually interact with the space underneath him. So you'll think that you've got something in the can. You're like, this is great. This is not a problem. You'll play a card and it moves him right to your spot, and you're shaking your fist at the heavens like, Biff!
I was lucky enough to see Back to the Future in theaters, and we went down to my grandparents' house. They lived down the shore. We saw it one night over the weekend, and we got out. It was great. I had a blast. Everything you guys say, I echo all of that. And I got home and I'm sitting in this bed, trying to go to sleep in my grandparents' house, and I had terrible nightmares about the Libyans. I really, truly thought that the Libyans were going to come and kidnap me and kill everybody in the house. And for some reason, that really messed me up that night. Do the Libyans play a part in the board game?
No, they don't.
Good. Thank you.
Don't.
Okay.
No, they are. I'm not even going to joke. Yeah, no, they they do not make an appearance. Not in this game. So, and then the thing is, you never had to worry because you did not try to sell them a shoddy bomb casing parts and pass it off to the bomb. Because if you'd done that, you'd be in trouble.
I was like 7. I didn't know any better.
Well, one thing that Stu and I often talk about is that time travel is generally a broken concept. I would argue that Back to the Future, as it stands, is the gold standard for time travel across all forms of media. And I think that playing a cooperative game where you have to make sure that key events happen in order to keep the timeline secure is genius. So you really do get to play as 4 different versions of Marty and Doc. And I'm looking at some of the artwork for the game. Everyone gets their own DeLorean, so no one's going to argue over that.
Right. And that was key. We wanted to make sure that you're actually going to move your DeLorean around and you get to play around with that. And I'm not going to lie, we've had people who played with the final version of the game for the first time, and they get to play with those DeLoreans, and they are making sound effects. They're going, they're flying the DeLorean around and everything. So it's definitely a lot of fun. Time travel in board games is so tricky. I think Back to the Future set its rules very clearly about what time travel was. And for me, I'm okay if a movie or a TV show has a different set of rules about time travel than Back to the Future, as long as they adhere to the rules that they set up. You can't decide what time travel is and then sort of change it. That's kind of a problem I had with Avengers Endgame. They sort of just kept making up the rules of time travel as they went, and they would say, oh, it's not like this, and then it was like this, and then it's not. That's the only time I get taken out of any kind of time travel thing. So for Back to the Future, I felt like they wrote some pretty strong rules, and then they followed them pretty closely. And that was good for me. You can suspend disbelief about why did Marty not disappear right away? Why was the photograph disappearing and all that? That was the cinematic conceit, and you got behind that pretty quick. As far as the game goes, I've played a lot of time travel games where there's a lot of, if A happens, then B changes, and then C changes and D changes. Or if you flip this, then these things change, or you go down this different path. And we made a decision early on that while we wanted to give you the feeling of traveling through time and having to do important things, we really wanted this game to be something that was playable by a casual player, but fun enough where a gamer would really get into it. And what we found was the further we went down the rabbit hole of rippling events, changing the future and doing all this, it became a heavier game that was harder to get into. And for a game that we want a family to be able to put this on the table and get into quick, what we chose to do was you get to ripple your dice through time. So if one of the players is in 1885, they can put one of their rolled dice on their space, like in the clock tower in 1885. And let's say it's a flux capacitor, which allows you to time travel in the game. You put the flux capacitor die on the clock tower space you're on in 1885. Now it's as if you wrote a letter and put it in the mail.
Oh, that's cool.
That die exists going forward in 1885, 1955, 1985, and 2015. Any other player, or yourself if you move, can go down to a clock tower in a future year and basically use that die, ripple it forward, and use it in order to complete an action. Whereas a lot of games, they make the board change or the game state change because of time travel. We chose to use the rippling of things through time, like the newspapers and stuff in the movies. It's basically giving your future self information without having to bump into yourself. So that's how we kind of did the time rippling effect from the movies.
That's awesome. That is such a well thought out little chunk of how this works. That's great. I'm very excited about that.
And it is absolutely crucial to win, because if you have Twin Pines Mall in 1985 and Doc is unveiling the DeLorean to Marty, there's 3 potential cards in the deck that go there, each of which has dice faces associated with it that you need to be able to spend when you're on that spot to clear that event, to make sure it happens. And if you've waited too long and all 3 of those cards show up on that spot, it becomes an incredibly difficult event to solve if you just move to it. Other players, you have to communicate as a team and say, okay, I'm going to go up to 1885 and I'm going to leave you a die. And then someone else says, okay, I'm going to go over here, I'm gonna leave this and I'm gonna get the heck out of there. So you actually work together to get the collection of things you need, and that becomes a real fun part of the game. It's a lot of fun to watch new players learn how to play the game. That's part 1. It's a trilogy like the movies. Part 1 is learning the basics of the game. Part 2 is mastering how they can use their own dice to get stuff done. And then part 3 is actually working together and coordinating their dice and the Einstein tokens, which every time you return an item, the space-time continuum goes down 1 space, so you're good. I mean, you lose some of the badness. And Einstein, you get these tokens, you flip one over, and it gives you basically a free dice face that anyone can use. It's a reward for helping the space-time continuum. And it becomes fun because everyone's got ideas on how they can accomplish the mission, and it's so much fun to watch a group start to get to that place where they're playing the game in a really collaborative way.
It's interesting because I feel like a lot of collaborative games settle down into one player sort of conducting traffic while everybody else is sort of doing what they say. And
Yep.
it seems like this kind of pushes back on that and prevents that from happening. It really fosters collaboration.
I would absolutely agree with that. We've played a lot of games where there's quarterbacking going on. So one
Yeah.
person's really, they're calling all the plays and they're saying this is what we're going to do, and they can take over. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that can't happen in this game if you have someone who's an alpha player who really takes over. However, when it's your turn, what you use your dice to do is completely on your shoulders. So everybody has their time to shine. And we've found no situations where someone walked away and was like, well, I just felt like I wasn't doing anything. That guy was just running the whole show. It's definitely something where the people are having fun because they're collaborating.
That's awesome. And winning the game is when you put the final misplaced item back in its proper year. However, losing the game is if the tracker reaches 12, you're out of time.
That is absolutely right. Yes. And that's something that we wanted to make adjustable. So the number of items misplaced in time, you can adjust that to have a more difficult or less difficult game. So you can start in Science Experiment, which is just 2 items are lost per year. You can go up to Nobody Calls Me Chicken, which is all of the items in the game, which is 5 per year, which is basically crazy insane mode, which is nearly impossible. But usually you go with 3 items per year that are misplaced. So it's a total of 12 items. And when you get all 12 of them returned, once the last one goes, the game is over and you win.
If we lose, do we all sort of wink out of existence?
Yes, you have to set the game on fire and go buy a new one.
So speaking about buying the game, if you want to pick up Back to the Future Dice Through Time, the pre-order starts on June the 7th. If you want to stop at a Target where it's going to be an exclusive and pick it up in person, you can do that on the 21st of June. I highly recommend, if you're a fan of Back to the Future, if you're looking for a cool cooperative game to play with your family while you're stuck indoors, Back to the Future Dice Through Time is going to be exactly what you're looking for. So Chris, are you working on anything else that you can talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for Calliope Games. That's my day job. And we make filler and gateway titles. One of my games on there is Roll For It. We also publish Suro and some others. But I have a game that's coming late this year called Mass Transit, which is a cooperative transportation game that you can fit in your pocket. It's actually designed by me and Kevin Rogers, who's one of my co-designers for Back to the Future. So I'm really excited about that one because that's one that you can get together and play with up to 6 people. Really simple gameplay, but it's tricky and you have to work together. There's limited communication in that game. The other thing that is coming out very shortly is Unmatched Cobble and Fog, which is the next set for the Unmatched series from Restoration Games. I did the development on the decks for that, which is Invisible Man, Jekyll and Hyde, Sherlock Holmes, and Dracula.
Dracula is my favorite monster of all time. Shut up and take my money.
Yeah, these decks are a lot of fun. We had a blast working on these. So, and I'm doing some more work with them, which I'm really excited about, which will be coming down the pipe later. But yeah, so those are the things that are going on in the hopper. And there's, lots of other designs. I'm always tinkering with different things, but those are the things that are coming out in the near future.
Well, fantastic. I'll definitely be looking out for that. Chris, where can the people find you online?
I can be found lurking in the dark recesses of the internet. You can go on the Twitters and you can find me at Leader88. That's LEDER 88. That would be a good place to go.
Very cool, Chris. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to Stu and I about Back to the Future Dice Through Time.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Chris Leader for sitting down with Stu and I to chat about Back to the Future Dice Through Time. The game is up for pre-order now and will be available June 21st at Target. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.